Meeting to order. So welcome everyone. And our first action item is to approve the DAC meeting summary from August 11th. Any corrections or comments? Okay, so then hearing none, we'll call that being approved. And the first item on our agenda is discussing the DAC bylaws. So, and given this is my first meeting beginning as chair and my first agenda item to present, let me begin with celebrating that our NCPRD staff orchestrated exceptional and valuable process to assist us get started. That orientation allowed us to see and hear about the parks and the facilities and the people that most of us wouldn't have known otherwise. And I really want to thank the staff for putting that together. I think it was a perfect ramp up and I'm richer for it. So thank you. From what I've observed, it has been the core of NCPRD's accomplishments that are the stories and the caring people. And that got to highlight a bunch of those pulling together over the last 30 years that really has mattered most in getting us this far. So way back in 1990, Bill Broad and a bunch of folks had advocated for upcoming a swimming pool, and it led to young lifeguards who never left and they're on staff, or avid swimmers, some who are on our DAC right now, and kids whose lives were enriched. So the Springs Park was the first stop that I got to go to, and the connections that preserve nature as well as shape and evolve the appropriate path to allow people to get to Elk Rock and provided environmental and preservation access. And then we went on another one to Altamont, and for the DAC to hear and respond to a special needs concern for path access, and then to hear about the juggling and the remaining of unknowns about the possible next door properties, et cetera, just gives a different kind of insight. In addition to other properties, there's the Justice property, which in fact has been for a long time dependent on what about the adjacent properties, or the River Villa Park, which is a phenomenal reclaiming of a natural riverfront. And out of that, it spawned a budding friends group, and it also attracted one of our new DAC members. So that leads us to one of the big highlights of our tour was the Milwaukee Bay Park. And it really represented, and we got to hear more about the years of support and the years of work acquiring the property and the donated properties and the community involvement in creating a vision for a regional destination with nature and boats and fishermen and fisher persons, I suppose, and entertainment venues for adults and kids alike. So, and then of course, the Concord property, which I am more familiar with, is really an example of, and more people that got to find out, it was saving something in response to a community request and historic interests. It's honoring that was a land grant piece of property that was donated. And there have been 3 former schools, including the WPA building that's there now. And years of kids and families and memories are saved. And now with the hopes of a new park and a community center and a library that's been dreamed of for years, plus a gym and a performing arts center and facility, the community service center and a history hub, it is the community's just totally excited about that. We also have the Trolley Trail, which I was involved in from way back, and it runs a couple doors over from my house, and it provides another good example of the continuing to bring people together. And that includes like the original founders, but also the walkers and the bicyclists and the commuters and the kids and the neighbors and the friends of the Trolley Trail, which is still alive to this day and has evolved as an active group that's been in existence for years, including neighbors from Park Avenue and H-Dog and Oak Grove, Risley, Jennings Lodge, all the neighbors that are connected by the Trolley Trail. And then I really appreciate the story of the Wichita Park and the Wichita School, both of which brought people together for a neighborhood project, and the Wichita School, which has been serving as a neighborhood community asset for a good while. So these are all examples of that suggest to me it is the stories and the inclusion and the great stories of committed staff with 25 years or more active involvement from the aquatic center and the rec and facilities programs, in the community needs, and in the partnering. What brought me and many others was something we cared about: connecting with neighbors. So our DAC is designed to help provide the links with community, neighbor connections, and fostering caring and hopes. Thing I want to be clear about, there's not enough money to have all these needs provided by the staff alone. By assisting and including our community as residents to feel heard and included, expanding this can assist expanding inclusion, and more caring and more interest and more resources. Working together fosters connections and sense of ownership in our one whole district. So in my 50 years with big organizations and community work, it is that shared vision, including the details and the results and the data, that are so important. It may be messy, but it brings resources that are additive. So with that in mind, I'd like to actually have us look at what's on the screen. My question is, has everyone read this sufficiently, or do we want to go through it? Who would like to go through it now? Please speak up. Okay, Ben, great. We'll go through it now.
Well, since we're being asked to participate, I wanted to let whoever's running the meeting, the technical part of the meeting, Ryan Stee, is called in and he's in the attendee list. If someone's able to pull him over into the panel so he can participate. I think his name is in there.
Yeah, I renamed him. Unfortunately, it's not letting me pull him over. I don't know if it's because he's a call-in or if there's something weird in our settings, but I'm aware he's there and I'm watching him. If he raises his hand, I'll let everyone know so he can talk.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, good. So other than, and thanks, Ben, for saving one of ours, but does anyone want to specifically read through this? Because I have questions I want to pose, but it's based on that people are familiar with this. Anyone want it to be read now? I don't see any hands. Don't hear anybody. Good. So for me, the most important part, I still want to leave this on the screen, is what part do we as the DAC play as representing constituents' views, interests, and desires? So I want to pose the question, as DAC representatives, do we primarily support, are we primarily supposed to express, represent our own views as sample members of the sub area, or are we primarily supposed to express, represent views, interests, and desires of the residents? It's a question that I don't know has a uniform alignment, and I don't know that we're going to answer it now, but I like to hold that question and get the other 5 questions that I want to have us address, and then we can talk about them or decide to do something different with it. But that's the question that is key to me, is who do we speak for when we speak as DAC members? So given the agenda time constraint, let me run through the other 5 questions. And it really focuses on how we accomplish our assigned goals to be an advisory voice for the board of directors who appointed us. So first question is, these all come right out of the document in front of you: to review and provide input prior to the publication of the annual report. Now, I don't want the answer now, but I need to know where is the cycle of the annual report so we know how and when we can fit into that, because that's one of our accountabilities. The second one is to evaluate and address the programs and facilities of the NCPRD, concentrating on the annual work plan that addresses the challenges, desires, and needs of all district residents. So my question is, where is the status of, what is the current annual work plan we're working off of? Does it have a different name and I'm just not following? That's another question I want to get to. Policy level recommendations regarding acquisitions, assets, capital improvements, programs, maintenance, and operations to be approved by the board of directors. And then here's a key one: provide recommendations during the annual budget process for the acquisition, development, operation, and maintenance and facility programs. And then the last one is to identify and prioritize necessary capital projects and provide project recommendations to the board of directors. So again, since the last four, that's a lot of stuff. But what we have to look at is there hasn't been a district advisory board or committee in full functioning for nearly somewhere in the neighborhood of 4 years. So my question is, where is the current identified priorities for capital projects? And what is our process to get from here to whenever the next time we get to serve that up? And I assume it's about budget season, which means we got like less than 6 months. So those are the questions. So we need to look at to meet our assigned responsibilities. I really appreciate NCPRD staff for having carried this load while the DAB, DAC was in a state of flux with the changes with Happy Valley, et cetera. And yet now it's important to me to plan how we can, as the DAC, representing our resident communities, ramp up to fulfill our roles as advising the board of directors in this whole NCPRD district for all residents. So do we want to consider and talk about these now, or do we want to ponder these questions and have it be at the top of our next agenda, because there's a lot on this agenda already? So comments, thoughts from anyone, please. Well, there we go. Anita.
Well, it seems to me that this is a pretty tall order and there's a lot involved. And I wonder if we should make a subcommittee, create a subcommittee to really take a deep dive into this and then report back at the next meeting. Anyway, it's just one of the possibilities.
Okay, that at least moves the ball forward as opposed to nothing. And then we just meet again, because these questions haven't been answered. And we do need to figure out how we're going to answer them. Yes, Maureen. You're muted, Maureen.
Thank you. I think that, you were very specific in the questions that you were asking. I think that our secretary should collaborate and make sure that there's a clear agenda to address those issues. And I vote that we move forward and have that at least by the next meeting, if that's appropriate.
Okay. And as an FYI, it'll come up later in the meeting. Monday, we will be meeting to set the next agenda. What we figured out is to be able to get the materials out to people, we need to be farther ahead of that. So at our Monday meeting, we can make sure it is on the agenda for next time. My only thought or concern or question is it going to be left that we think about it and then we'll have the discussion kicking off? That'd be fine with me. Give people a month to think about it. So any thoughts or comments?
Well, I would like to see some progress in any direction. And because the last several meetings, it's been apparent that my voice, I'm trying to find my voice. But I agree with so many of the aspects of what you've just said. And so if this can be tabled as further discussion and officially put forward to more open discussion and other people in chiming in, then if that helps us move forward tonight, I do that.
Okay, Luca, please.
Yeah, I was second that. I think there's a lot there that we want to get into, but I think we owe it to our NCPRD staff to give them a month to put together some answers to some of those questions, and even just give our new director a bit of a chance to get his head wrapped around it as well and have some answers and sort of some insights of his own. So I think moving it to next month's a good idea.
Okay, I can live with that. The only thing I want to be clear is that I also want us. I appreciate whatever answers come from the staff, because in truth, if we didn't have the staff to provide what they provide us, we would be way out there. But it really is, my focus is to include how do we find out what our residents who have chosen us to represent them. How do we find out what specifically are their interests and concerns, et cetera? That's the part that if the staff's going to give us some suggestion, that's fine. I actually just think we'll see what they have, but then I want us to be able to talk about it next time, and it's fine with me. Thank you, Luca. Anybody else? Maureen, is your hand still up or? Okay, good. All right, great. So that will be moved into our discussion on Monday on setting the next agenda.
I have a question.
Okay, there you are. Hi.
So will we get a copy of these questions? Because to give a really intentional and thoughtful answer, I need to have these questions in front of me so I can go, line by line and really figure out and get in depth with what answers you're looking for.
Excellent. They're all on the screen in front of you. All I did was excerpt from there. There is no question I added except the one about, are we representing our own, being a sample resident from our sub area, or are we in fact representing our, as the bylaws call for, are we actually speaking for the desires, wishes of all of our representatives? There's nothing that I said that isn't on the screen other than I ad lib a bit. Yes, Mike.
If I would make the suggestion toward Mr. Nicodemus's comment, at agenda setting, we can list those questions out as part of it. And then when we publish the agenda later on, middle of next week, then you'll have those.
Right. Thanks. Good solution, Mike. Thank you. And thanks for your question, Desi. Okay. Somewhere buried in my papers is the agenda. Next item. System development charges overview. Please take it away.
Mike, you're muted. And your hand is raised.
I'm muted and my hand was raised. I unmuted myself. It just didn't work. Sorry. So what I was saying is normally Heather would be here providing this information as she is our subject matter expert, but she is on a well-deserved vacation right now. I believe she's on, I don't remember which river, but she's on a river somewhere. So I will be handling this. I will be relying on staff that are here if there are questions that arise that I can't answer. But we really tried to keep this very first, and keep in mind, this is the first of probably several presentations just related to STCs. What we wanted to do today was provide an overview for folks that aren't as familiar, maybe a refresher for those that are, and hopefully bring up some points that everybody can relate to. So I'm not, with no other further ado, I'm just going to jump right into this. So system development charges, or SDCs, we hear that a lot when we're talking about capital projects. What those are, the system development charges, they're one-time fees for new development or development that's going to increase growth in a particular area. Those fees are charges that are paid by the developer when it's calculated as they're planning their development. Those SDC calculations are factored at that point. What they are typically used for in-house for us is to help partially fund parks, trails, and facilities that are needed to serve that growth. So the SDC use is supposed to be tied to growth, and that's why we collect those. There are a few things that we can't use SDCs for, and that's our general operating budget. We can't use it to pay staff or anything like that. We can't use it for maintenance and repairs. And as I said, the project, if it's eligible, has to support that growth. So what we wanted to try and do as more of a narrative is to give you the life of an SDC dollar in 5 easy steps. So step one, as we mentioned right at the beginning, the developers are going to pay a fee per the STC rates. And there are differences in rates between residential, commercial, mixed use, and Parks and Recreation are not the only STC rates. There's others that are charged. We're just going to be focusing on what Parks and Rec district, what we receive. But you recognize that it does come from different forms but the developers are the ones that are paying that one-time fee. Once they've paid that fee, our local development authorities collect that, and right now there's 2 of them. Clackamas County collects SDCs, so does the city of Milwaukee, specifically for growth related to city of Milwaukee. Both of those development authorities collect it and then transfer it on a yearly basis to NCPRD right around our budgeting time, so that we can have those numbers accurately reflected in the next year's budget. Once the fees have been collected and distributed, it's our job to track all of those SDC funds as they come in and then as they're allocated and expended out. So that's a pretty easy step. After that, we budget annually, allocating those to be used on those eligible capital projects. And eligibility is based on a couple of things. Again, does it support growth, as well as what things it can be used for and to what level based on our current methodology. And finally, in the life of the SDC dollars, once we've done those first 4 steps of collecting, distributing, budgeting, and forecasting, then we use those funds to pay a portion of the acquisition and development costs for capital projects. And I want to make sure that we make the distinction that it's both for acquisition and development, which includes some planning functions, design functions, as well as the acquisition of properties, and then ultimately the construction of those ones that are eligible projects. So that's very briefly just the 5 kind of steps in the life of an SDC dollar. But how do those help fund the projects? SDCs are a small part of total project dollars typically. They can be larger depending on the project itself and what's eligible and what's been budgeted for. And you all will be part of that discussion as we go through budget preparation. But generally, there's these main 6 sources of, you see SDCs, grants, any bonding, either revenue bonds or general obligation bonds. Donations, those can be in several forms. They could be straight donations or sometimes even pass through. We've also got our partners, and there's usually partners for every single project. And a lot of times those dollars are smaller. And then we have a general other category, which could be anything from general fund usage to, which is fairly limited in capital projects, to any other miscellaneous that doesn't fall into the other 5 categories. We wanted to give you an example. So the next slide shows the example. Chair Bornefeld mentioned the Wichita Park project, and we wanted to give you an idea of, just in a single snapshot park, how SDCs played a part in this project. So as you can see, for this project itself, 56% of the project was paid for through SDCs. 41% was through the Oregon Parks and Recreation, OPRD, Candy or somebody, that's not ORPA.
It is the Oregon Park Recreation Department. It's the lottery fund.
The lottery funds, that's what okay. We had 2% in other contributions, and then, as you see, 0.5% in private contributions. So when you combine all of those, that's how we paid for the Wichita Park. 56% of those were through SDCs, SDC dollars. So moving beyond the what SDCs are and how they can be used, we wanted to talk about general methodology overview. And these 4 guiding points really would be with any methodology that we use now or that could be used in the future. Everything on this sheet still applies. We're going to connect the demands of growth to the collection and the use of the SDC, so that, again, we have to be able to show growth for the project to be eligible. We're still going to identify specific types of parks and recreation facilities that are eligible, analyze the need of each type of the facility proportional to its growth, and then set rates for collection and eligibility to use the funds. So this is just an overview guiding for any SDC methodology. This is how we would approach any project. So our methodology today, right now, has, as everybody I'm sure is aware, 3 zones. Each zone has different rates and eligibility dependent on the zone. And generally, what's collected in a zone has to be spent in a zone. And that's based on the most updated ordinance from 2017, but that's using a 2007 methodology. So if anybody, and I know Chair Bornefeld, I believe was involved during this, and others may have, but back in 2018, there was a study done to update the methodology for how we use STCs. The recommendation at the time was that we move to a uniform methodology, so we get rid of all the zones, and that we flatten out the eligibility rates of what could be used. And those ranged from, as you see here, 13.3%, which I believe was for trail work and maybe natural space, all the way up to 21.6, which was for bigger facilities. But it would be a lower rate that everybody is standardized at that same level, but it's applied throughout the district. The problem is back when that methodology was being presented was right at the time and was factored in with Happy Valley no longer being in the district. And at that point, when they were denied the ability initially to withdraw, this whole process got kind of put on hold. So as you see, it's not yet adopted. And I believe this next slide shows a better timeline. So how we got to where we're at today on our current methodology is we're still using that same 2017 methodology based on the 2007 model. In April of 2018, after the recommendation came through to have a uniform methodology, the SDC steering committee reached consensus and recommended that methodology. The Milwaukee City Council actually took it a step further and did a resolution supporting the elimination of the zones. But then in June of 2018, the Happy Valley, the judge ordered that they had to remain in the district. And that's when things got paused on this methodology study. And then in July 2020, once they were officially separated from the district, we could have moved forward. Unfortunately, during that time, July 2020, that was right in the midst of COVID and everything else. And so things have moved forward to where we're at basically today. So where we're at today is we have two separate groups or bodies that support the methodology of moving to a uniform methodology strategy. But what did not happen was the next steps of that, which were to basically vet the numbers and create the data. There was I believe it was called a phase 2 or a phase 3 of the methodology study. And when that got put on hold, everything just got kind of put aside and shelved. So possible next steps that we're looking at to re-engage this conversation is working with the original consultant, one of the groups, the only ones in the business that do SDC studies, work with them to understand how reliable the existing data is. Is all of it still usable from 2018, or does stuff need to be updated? The consultant is going to recommend if there should be additional public engagement, because the next step of after everybody agreeing that a uniform methodology was the path to move forward, there were already planned, I believe it was at least 3 public meetings to find out more about how that would actually work. So that never happened. Staff plans to bring back to you all recommended action, and we hope to do that within the next couple of months to have at least more information on the path moving forward. But we don't know exactly until we can talk to the consultants and get things figured out how much updating may be needed, if any, or whether we can adopt the existing methodology and update numbers and data later, which is a possibility. But ultimately, we're going to bring back a recommendation to you all. It may be as early as next month, but with our agenda setting, I'm going to guess it's probably not going to be until November, because we're not going to have enough information for next month's meeting since we're setting the agenda next week. And then ultimately, we'll hopefully bring either one or more recommendations to you all, which then we will ask for you to make a recommendation to the NCPRD board. Sorry, I thought there was a question slide after that. that is the high level SDC, System Development Charge overview. I would love to entertain any questions if anybody has questions about the content, or if you need me to go back so you can see a slide again or whatever.
Jan had raised her hand. Did she have a question? No.
Okay.
Dave, go ahead, Dave.
Okay, I guess I'm wondering what is this data that needs to be updated? Is that the dollars? Because I'm assuming we still collected SDCs during this time when there was nothing else going on, and there was still some money coming in during that time. And I'd be interested in what the rates are. Maybe that's a later time.
And really the study would be to help better determine what those rates should be. So that 13 to 21 or 22% range, that was just it's not a squishy number, but it was based on just initial information. And my understanding is the consultants would want to re-engage with the district as a whole in public processes. Obviously, DAC would be involved in that as well, to essentially vet the data to be able to present a full methodology. Right now, everybody's just agreed that we should get rid of the zones and have a levelized plan, but no information has actually been put forward as far as recommendations yet. And that's what we would hope to bring back to you all.
Yes, Desi.
I have a comment and then maybe a question. First of all, whoever put this presentation together about SDCs, I love it. I would have loved to have had this before I started city council, because people don't know what SDCs are and what they do. And I'm wondering if this is something that we share with the public on what SDCs are. And if we do share with the public, can we get this translated in Spanish and Russian so folks who live in the district know what SDCs are? Because this is really good information that I think folks should know. And that's it.
Thank you, Mr. Nicodemus. Yeah, that is exactly what Melina and I have been talking about. One of the things that I like to do with PowerPoint presentations after we've done them, if people like the content, is to go back in and have a narrated version that we can then put onto the web. I try not to make the slides so wordy that they, so to provide that context fill in. And then, yes, I'm planning on reaching out to, I believe we've got the resources here within the county to get translation services to get them produced in other forms and have all of that available. With that said, also, I would be more than happy to come to a Milwaukee City Council meeting and make this presentation as well. You just need to let me know if that's something that you'd like.
Oh, they all know what SDCs are. I was a rookie. I had to learn on the fly. But this, like, if I would have had this before, this would have come in real handy. So I really appreciate, it's not a lot of words, and this is coming from a teacher's point of view. If you want to keep people's attention, keep it short, sweet, to the point, and that's exactly what this did.
That's my theme, short, sweet, and to the point. Thank you. I appreciate the comment.
Okay, Deborah.
Hi. Could we, when we make this presentation, could you provide some comparables? Because I have no idea what, let's say, other districts or cities or whatever, what kind of rates do they have for SDCs? I mean, we had a sliding range. So I just don't have a context for that.
Yeah, and part of the re-engagement with the consultants would be to have them be doing market studies exactly for that, so that we can have comparables to be able to say, well, here's what other places have for their methodologies. I believe some of that information may have been put out back in 2018. I haven't seen it yet, but that would be something definitively that we would be giving to you as we start making recommendations, to let you know, give you context of other area.
Thank you.
And Anita.
Yes, I realized that I looked this over ahead of time, but I'm a little puzzled about the phrase has to promote growth. And maybe you could just weigh in on that for me, somebody.
Sure. Well, the system development charges are charged based on growth. So they're not just charged for, any reason other than it's specifically tied to growth in a particular area. And right now, with the 3 zones, there's different calculations for different growths and different allocations based on growth. We would have some similar restrictions on even a uniform methodology where if there was an area that wasn't experiencing growth, that would have to be factored in on its eligibility for a project. But how we define that growth right now is not very clear to me as far as what the factors are in determining whether there would be quote unquote sufficient growth. That's part of the learning process that I'm going through as well at this point. But really the point behind that is you have to be able to show that there is an impact based on growth to that project, whether it's more people, more houses, transportation corridors that have increased, things like that, that show that growth in the area. But how that's fully applied to a uniform methodology is not clear to me yet.
Okay, seeing no hands up, I actually have a question. I'm not clear how the rates and right now, the challenge we have is we are no longer one NCPRD district. We actually have divided into 3 separate zones with separate funding, et cetera. And that's been a big concern of a lot of people. So my question is, how are the rates and clarifying the rates related to, in fact, what Milwaukee resolution was, which was to do away with the zones? How does the rates fit into that conversation and re-verifying that versus holding the question clean and just doing away with the zones and then adjust rates as needed going forward, et cetera?
And that's a very good question, Chair. I asked that question and the answer as I understand it, and with that caveat that as I understand it, being new to SDCs, and if Candy has her hand up, my understanding is if we change the methodology and get rid of the zones, we can't just use the existing rates and calculations because they're based on zones. So we have to refigure how projects are eligible and at what rate, because the uniform methodology is not just getting rid of zones, it's also applying a uniform methodology to the rates as well, is the way I understand it. Candy, do you have something to add on? Okay.
Oh, your hand's up for something else? Okay, good. All right, so I'm wondering, Commissioner Savas, I know you've been involved in this from the get-go. Do you have any insight as to how those two, I appreciate what you just said, Mike, and I'm still not clear because the rates are not hugely different and they can be changed again and again and again. So my big concern right now is that we are not a whole district. We are 3 segregated zones. Please, Commissioner Savas.
Well, I have not, as I kind of mentioned the last time, I have not viewed the report, the STC report that was worked on, Grover, when you were on the committee. I would imagine that they had to come up with a uniform STC rate at the time, a one flat rate for probably the district, I assume. I don't know, but I would certainly really wonder if how much this study would cost and how much time it would take if it's really bona fide is really necessary. If the work's already been done, great, but I think I heard Mike say, which is new information to me, that there was another phase or 2 to be a phase 3 or 2 or 3. So I'd like to get more information about that. But I think the sooner we get it done, the better, because we could possibly be losing revenue as building and construction is happening. So we ought to be in front of it as soon as possible.
We are still, if I understand correctly, we are still collecting STC rates. And the eligibility, I mean, some projects are 100% eligible. Some projects are not 100% eligible. The uniform methodology wouldn't be one rate that is slapped across everything. As I had shown, there was a range even from the original consultant that should be considered depending on the type of project. I agree. I would like to move this forward as quick as possible. The information that I'm getting from my experts and from the consultant that is not advisable. And I can provide you, Commissioner Savas, with additional information. Again, we had said that this needs to be discussed more. I did not want to get into new methodology at this point because we don't have all the information. So to speak on what rates we're going to have, this isn't the appropriate conversation or place to have that. This was meant to be an overview of SDCs and how they work. Just like, and we said, next steps, we'll bring you more information once we've got that, including timelines and expectations.
Yeah, but my comment, Mike, was not that we're not collecting SDCs, but that if they were different rates, and I think they were different rates for different zones, we may be under collecting as a result of that. So yeah, maybe you should get the old study out and get us all a copy. I'd appreciate that.
I actually pulled it up today. I found it. I just didn't have a chance to distribute it out to everybody. But my goal would be, I need to read through it. And yes, I would like for everybody to see what it's not a final report. It was a last report that we got from the consultant, basically outlining what needed to happen, once we brought things back up. And so I'll provide that to you.
Thank you. Will we all get it, or, I mean, I'm interested
Yes.
in getting it as well. Okay, good.
And Ryan C. has his hand up.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, hi, Mr. Bork. I have a question for you. It doesn't need to be answered at this moment, but it's just a clarification down the road. So I was a little, like Anita, I was kind of wondering about this based on growth. And from what I understand in most agencies within the region, it's the funds are used for capacity building. So having a clarification on whether it's based on capacity building or based on growth area, spending the STC funds would be great. Thank
Got
you.
it.
Okay. Kennedy, did you still have something you wanted to say?
No, I just wanted you to know that Ryan C. had his hand up this whole time.
I couldn't see that, so thanks for that. Okay, anything else on the system development charges overview? Dave, is that
I
your
just had
hand
one
up?
question.
Sure.
Yeah, I just one thing I'm being a little confused about, people are talking about rates. I wasn't clear whether they're talking about the rates where they're used to collect the funds from the different projects that are being built, or is it the rates that are percentages that are applied to what's being built in the parks, what parks are being built? And so it's kind of
Yes.
confusing when we talk about rates.
The answer is yes, it's both. So part of the methodology would potentially change how rates are calculated based on a no zone overall district, as well as the eligibility rates of how much a project is eligible to use STC funding.
Okay, great. All right, seeing no hands other than Dave, which I think it's going down, we can move to capital project.
Chair, you've got, Anita's got her hand up.
Oh, sorry, just happened there. Yes, ma'am.
Just an afterthought about zones. In 1990, there were no zones, and then sometime they came into being, but I forget when that was. I don't know how that happened. Maybe we don't need to know about that, but it was just in my mind at the moment. So I thought I'd mention it.
Right, the zones came into effect and then they began adjusting the SDC staying in the zone that they were generated in. So the two things happened independently.
Anita, that was in 2004 that the zones were introduced.
Okay, thank you.
And they were adjusted at a time after that.
Yeah,
um,
2007, there was an adjustment, and then in 2014, it looks like there were some changes as well.
Mhm. Okay,
Great, thank you.
all right. So capital project Concord School.
Okay, well, thank you for indulging me on the STC discussion, and I'm going to turn the first, at least most of the presentation over to Jason Varga, project manager for the Concord School project, both the Gladstone or the library and the school property itself. Jason.
Hi, everybody. Thanks. Can everybody hear me, first of all?
Yep.
Thanks for having me. I know I've had the opportunity to meet a few of you back when we toured the site in July. So we wanted to give you kind of a snapshot of where we're currently at with this project today. So let's go to the next slide here. So for some of you who might not be familiar with the location, the Concord School property is located just off 99 at Concord, behind the Walmart. So a little bit about this project. NCPRD purchased this property along with a couple others, I think, back in 2018. This is a joint project with BCS. That's because of the Oak Lodge Library. Right now, the design intent is for both of those projects to share some space. I think, as Grover mentioned before, this school was built in 1936, and the building is eligible to be on the National Historic Register. And I think that once everything's done, that would be the plan, is to get that put on the register. This project, the site will include the community center, the Oak Lodge Library, NCPRD administrative offices, and the park. Why are we doing this project? It'll be a district-wide amenity. It'll provide recreational and community gathering opportunities. The park will enhance green space in an unincorporated area. It gives space for NCPRD offices and programs to be in their district. And it also would provide a new sorely needed library facility in the community. So back in summer of 2019, we started with our public engagement. So it's been 2 years, but we've gotten a lot done in that 2 years. So you can see all the different events we've had. The Concord Task Force has done a really great job. I mean, when this started, we didn't have COVID, and we were doing a lot of stuff in person, and then we had to transition kind of in the middle of all this to doing things over Zoom and virtually. And everybody did a great job of making that transition and still getting us to a point, helping us get to the point we are today. So I got about that slide. So this is a site plan of the project in the current form. So what you're looking at is kind of on the left side of your screen. That's our park area. It's about 2 acres. And in the middle, you've got the library addition. And then to the right, you've got the existing school, with kind of in the back of that would be the new gymnasium. And then you also have about, I want to say it was just under 200 added parking stalls that we would add to the project also. So kind of going over the main parts here. So the park, it's about 2-acre park. We would have an inclusive playground, a picnic shelter with a couple bathrooms, a large open space, a field that could be used for soccer, some other sports, a sidewalk loop trail that would connect and tie into the surrounding neighborhood, and then a plaza area kind of in front of the library and connecting to the park. And then we've got the community center. So the pink area is the existing school, and then the purple is the new gym addition. So the new gym addition would be about 7,500 square feet. The school itself, I want to say, is about 45,000 square feet of space that they would have. In that space, we'd have multi-use classrooms, community kitchen, teen area, like I said, some office space. We still have the existing gymnasium and stage, and we'd have some flexible active use areas. And then we'd also be adding some green design features to this building also. And then the library right there. So that addition is about 10,000 square feet. The total library size would be about 19,500. So what you don't see in there is that part of the library actually would fall within the existing school building itself. So the school, or the community center and the library would share common entrance and space with the community center. And so these are some 3D renderings of it. So this is kind of looking down towards the front of the school. You can see, the stairwell or staircase to the old main entrance. And what you'll notice, and we'll see it a little closer up in some other pictures, is the main entrance now will kind of be in that left corner of the existing school, and that would be the main entrance to get into both the community center and the library. And then towards the back, you'd see with the white roof, that'd be the new gym addition. This is another view of it looking at towards the front. So that's where you're looking at the main entrance to the school right there. And then your library would be to the left there. This is kind of looking at it from the back. So you can kind of see there's a lot of natural light that can come into that library, and also the new gym addition. There's a lot of glazing there that'll allow a lot of natural light to come into that space. And then this is the view kind of from the side. If you're walking on the sidewalk on Concord Road, this is what you would see as you're walking by. With the towards the right there, you'd see the new gym addition, and then there'd be a little bit of new structure also right next to that gym. And then you've got the existing school to the left side of that screen. This is a view looking at the new gym addition. So it's kind of cool is you've got this, if you look on the right, this gym is seismically, it's a completely separate structure from the school itself. But you got that one wall would be the old brick, that you would see as one of the existing walls. So I thought that was pretty neat. And then right now what it shows is a CLT panel ceiling on there with some open web steel joists for the roof structure. And then this is just a picture of what the little pavilion area in the park would look like with the covered shelter space. So kind of give you an idea where we're at in this whole process. So in early this year, we got the master plan approved to move forward with this design concept. And since then, we've been working on the schematic design. So we have completed the schematic design. But as you'll see, we're having to look at some budget issues. So right now we're on hold waiting for our CMGC, which is what that stands for is construction manager, general contractor. And what we're wanting to do there is to have them help us with some estimating to get us some more detailed numbers and estimates based off of the schematic design drawings. So we're in the process. We've just selected that outfit, and we are working on getting a contract signed with them. So we're hoping very soon that we can get that process moving and get this project going again. So, and then once we get that go ahead, then we would go into design development, which is just providing more detail to the current design, and then working on construction documents, and then turning that in for permitting, and then starting construction, if all went well, would be probably towards the end of 2022. So we'll have a couple of slides here. This first one's going to be the budget. So what you'll see here is really the total project cost is really the two top numbers, the 7.9 in indirect costs, which is the cost of the design, having the architect, permits, furniture, staff, land purchase, all other miscellaneous costs. And then you've got direct construction costs, which right now are 24.4 million. And what these other numbers are is kind of the pieces where we've broken out of that 24.4. Like the school the renovation of the building itself is about 15.5 million. The gym addition would be just under 4. Parking and hardscape around the site is a little over 3 million. And then the park itself is just under 2 million. So that brings your total project cost to 32.3. And to give reference, I want to say we were just under 17 when we did the master plan. So things have gone up since then. And then so this is our funding side of things. And some of this information was in the master plan also, but we've updated it. So going through, we've got some grants, Metro local share of $750,000. We're looking for that. The Hoodview proceeds, that's solid at 3 million. Library proceeds that they would give for being part of the project. Potential property proceeds are some land that could be sold to help pay for some of the costs. The SDCs that we just talked about, that's I think been set at 2.4. This community block development grant right now, it's not going to be a whole lot, but we may be able to get some funding from that. And then the rest of that shortfall would be paid for by a revenue bond, which would be paid back with the NCPRD general fund. And right now, with things the way they are, we would be looking at around 13.5 million just to get, this is all just to get to 22 million. And you can see with the asterisk, that would equate to almost $1 million yearly debt payment. So Mike, I don't know if you wanted to speak a little bit more to that part of the funding.
Yeah, I mean, in the original, and neither Jason or I were here when this was going on, as the disclaimer. The way I understand it is back when the project was originally conceived, it was with the idea that we were going to go out for a general obligation bond. But because we don't have the master plan adopted because of other factors, COVID being involved in that, we don't really have the ability to do a geo bond at this point. So at some point in the past, that was switched over to a revenue bond of $13.5 million. As you see on here, it's an estimated about just under $1 million a year debt repayment on a 20-year bond. And that would basically bankrupt, we would be out of reserve funds in a little over 2 years. And so That number is just, it's in there because that is what is currently in the budget. But even that number is not a sustainable number. We could not afford to do that. So again, $32 million overall project estimate for costs. $22 million is what we had in the budget to find fund or having for funding sources. But really that 22 million needs to be more realistically about 15 million. Or that 13 million needs to be closer to a much smaller number than that for it to be sustainable. Problem is this is where we're at right now. And so Jason, I think the next slide is talking next steps about that. But are there, I guess, any questions on the budget part at this point? Commissioner Savas had his hand up, Chair.
Yes, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, well, two things. I know that when this came out, these new numbers came out, it was at the peak of the escalation in material cost. And since then, just in a matter of a month or two, those construction costs for at least wood, lumber has dropped significantly. So I'm hoping that we can get some newer numbers because again, I think these were, as I was explained to me, that these were at the peak of that escalation. That's one thing I wanted to say. The other one, could you go back one slide to the previous slide? My question is, does that 15.5 million in the middle, is everything below that a subset? Because I add those numbers together and I get $56 million, not 32.
Yeah, so the 15.5, the school renovation, gym addition, parking and hardscape and park, that all rolls up into that 24.4 million.
Okay.
So it's really the 24.4 plus the 7.9 gets you your total project cost as of today.
Okay.
And you're correct that when we did this estimate, it was back in July 14th, and wood especially, but some other materials too have spiked in cost. So wood for sure has gone down. We'll have to see with, like sheet metal and steel, how that stuff looks.
And that's where our contract management general contractor is going to be able to help us out and provide those updated numbers.
Yeah.
Yep, that's all I had. I just wanted to just express if that was correct, that it's perhaps not as bad as it looks today. So
yeah, we're not at 56.
All right, Ben.
Yeah, I didn't see the breakout of the library in that equation. Did I miss something? Is that included somewhere? Is the library not getting built?
I mean, because this was for NCPRD and the DAC, we left the library portion of it out. I do know, obviously, it's a integral part of this project. I want to say the library itself is right around 10 million, I think, is the cost of the library for it.
I was just concerned that the optics of it, if it was buried in those numbers, and that the park.
No, yeah, the library is separate.
For the library. Okay.
Yeah, library is separate. This is really, I mean, there's still some massaging, but for the most part, this would be NCPRD's portion. It'll change a little bit, but.
Thanks for the clarification. I just wanted to add kudos to the district for doing such a great, ambitious project. This is like serious diamond in the rough that, the district can hang their hat on and hopefully point to in the future if we want to raise additional money, whether it's bond or whatnot. So big projects like this and like Milwaukee Bay Park that have a great impact across the whole district. Super awesome, great kudos. I'm super happy that you all are doing that, especially in this part of the district that is in great need. So thank you all for your hard work.
Great. Any other questions?
Well, we've got a couple more slides.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, sorry.
So this Mike kind of alluded to before. So right now we're showing this $10.3 million funding gap. So if you can go to the next slide. So what we're gonna do, I mean, our biggest challenge obviously is to align the budget with our funding. So the main strategies we have going forward to try to get there is value engineering, which if you're unfamiliar, really what value engineering is you're trying to find a material or something that would be comparable to maybe what's designed that would be less costly and still get the job done. Obviously, we're going to look at scope reduction, strategic phasing. The reduction and phasing kind of go hand in hand. And then we got to look for additional funding sources and see if there's some additional funding sources out there. So that's really where we're at right now and what we can try to do to get that aligned.
I had a question.
Yeah.
It was actually when there was that we were going to get one kind of bond and now we can't do that. So we're doing another one that's cost prohibitive. And it had to do with that we were in COVID and the master plan wasn't approved. Are those things still, obviously COVID's still here, but I thought you said the master plan was approved. So
yeah.
Is that something that is still doable and it's a better financial arrangement? That part didn't make sense to me. And I don't have to hear it all now if nobody else cares, but I would like to know that.
Sorry, I should have clarified when I said master plan, I was talking about our comprehensive district master plan, not the project specific master plan. Project specific master plan has been approved. But right now, for instance, Concord School, the whole property itself, since we've newly acquired it, is not even in our CIP plan. Normally the CIP plan or CIP list or strategic path forward is developed as part of our comprehensive master plan. So right now, as it sits, because it's not been adopted into our CIP plan, it's not eligible for STC funding. There's other things that happen. So we've got a few moving pieces that we need to stop moving while we're trying to do these 4 strategies here. And really all of them are going to be looked at concurrently so that we can see what's a real project cost or a more realistic project cost, and then be looking at how do we actually move that forward. So it's project master plan versus our overall master plan. Sorry for that confusion.
Okay. And then the other piece that I'm curious about is given that I'm on the task force for Concord besides all this, and I'm also on the library board. There was a lot of discussion about trying to get the most land we could. What is the potential property proceeds? Is that part of the Concord property that has potential 2 million proceeds, or is that a different property proceeds, potential property proceeds?
It'd be different. I can't, off the top of my head, I can't remember which one, but it wouldn't be Concord necessarily. It'd be a different property.
Okay, good. I just want to clarify because we were fighting for every square inch to be able to use all that we could. Okay, good. All right, Deborah.
Hi. Under scope reduction, do you have, is there anything specific that you have in mind? What does that mean?
It would mean, like, you know, for the park, maybe we look at certain parts of the park that we would take out of the scope. It could be certain parts of inside the building that we just wouldn't build out or would change the scope. That's we have some ideas, but we need some better numbers to put to them to see if they're worth, you know, taking out. But yeah, it could be, there's a lot of different things you could do to reduce scope, but like, you know, the park has a playground and the covered shelter and some other stuff, and maybe we can't do all of it. We'd have to pick certain parts of it. Same with inside the building. Maybe certain programs don't get added in, at least right now, and maybe they get added in later.
And overall, Deborah, really nothing's off the table at this point.
Yeah.
From our perspective, we're going to be looking at every iteration that we possibly can to try and get this to a more affordable level. But what we don't want to do is cut down to the point where it reduces the effectiveness or purpose of the building, where we can afford to build something much less, doesn't do anybody any good. So we're trying to find that balance.
Thank you.
And Ben, you're up.
Great, thank you. Yeah, looking at the numbers with the park only being 1.7 million, I hope you don't cut areas that, in an area that really needs park. And obviously the strategic phasing to me almost could be above scope reduction, because I would hate to, dumb it down to a off-the-shelf playground versus doing something really cool with an inclusive playground, or not building the shelter yet but putting it into a later phase, and doing something pretty special here, and not dumbing it down, as Michael said.
Yeah, and these weren't put in order of what we're going to look at first. So yeah, I think of scope reduction and strategic phasing as kind of the same thing. Like, say you didn't build the gym addition, but you phased it so that you could add it on at a later date, and it would be less impactful to the site overall to do that. So that's kind of what we would mean by something like that. Same with the park. Like, maybe we build out certain parts of the park, but we can come back and add other parts and not have to start from scratch on it. So.
And part of what we're looking at, to use Jason's example, is, it might be easier to say, let's not do the gym, but we also recognize that the gym is going to be one of the primary revenue sources for that facility to bring in revenue, which we need to offset if we're going to have any kind of debt service. So it's fine. And again, now you are starting to see some of the balancing that Jason and I are trying to do to come up with a plan. And realistically, Ben, I fully expect that there's probably going to be elements of all four of these strategies, and probably others, to get us to a point where we can move forward. We are going to be very sensitive to, trying not to value engineer it out of a cool project.
Yeah. Yep. There's one more slide, if we can get through that, and then this is my last slide. So we maybe alluded to this a little bit, but the next steps are, as I mentioned before, hire and contract with the CMGC. We've picked the CMGC, and actually I think the contract went out for their review today. So I'm hoping that can get turned around fairly quickly. And I know the CMGC, they're really excited to be part of the project and to help us through our issues. Once that happens, we get that outfit on board. We would work with them and the architect and some other key stakeholders to just develop various strategies over the next 2 months. And then the plan would be to come up with our options and recommendations and bring those to the board and to the NCPRD board. We're hoping by mid-November. And then depending on what comes out of that meeting, we would proceed into the next phase of design based on the decision made by that board. So we're going to be putting in a lot of work over the next couple months to see if we can get this moving forward and get out of this hold. So with that, is there any other questions?
Yes, I had a couple. One, since the library isn't in this conversation and yet, we have a legal agreement with the city of Gladstone to be part of the one library, two locations. And their requirement is that the library be under construction by May of 2022. So if we don't fulfill that, and so the question is, we didn't even talk about building the library because if the biggest price is retrofitting the building.
Yeah.
So the library, albeit it's only 10,000 square feet, it's still a significantly greater piece than the library we're living in now.
Yeah.
So it's just something else. I don't know. I don't want the answers now, but I'm concerned about how that we look at that in the process of moving this back. And then the other part I was concerned about is what is our plan? And I don't know if this is to Mike or to you, Jason, or a combination there, or Commissioner Savas, is the CIP and the master plan so we can get the more attractive bond. Given the bond market now, it would be a shame to miss these low rates, et cetera. And I don't know what's our timeline to get that done.
I can't, I'm not prepared to answer that at this point, Chair.
Okay, I'll talk to you on Monday. Good, that's it for me, thanks. Anybody else, questions? Okay, hearing none.
Thank you,
We'll move-
Jason.
I think David had a question.
Oh, Dave, sorry.
Yeah, I hate to drag things out. I was just curious, are you building, does this include air conditioning in the building and what is the
Oh,
heating
yeah.
and cooling system? Are they going green and all that stuff?
Yeah, so currently what's designed is what we call a VRF heating cooling system, which is variable refrigerant flow. You could think of it like if you had a ductless system in your house, it's basically just a commercial size version of that, where it just uses refrigerant and sends it to different areas of the building as it needs it. And it's a very efficient way to heat and cool buildings like this.
Thanks. Thank you, Jason.
I think Luca had.
Oh, all right, missed that.
Sorry.
Lucky last. Just a quick question on that funding gap. I know at the end of the day, that's what it all comes down to. Has there been discussion, or is it something that we can even explore as NCPRD, doing some sort of, a corporate partnership with Nike or Adidas to co-brand the court, or reach out with the Trailblazers Foundation or the Timbers? I know that this is a bad time to ask anybody for anything at the moment. I understand that part of it. I'm just curious if that's even something we can do. And if it is would that be a consideration to try and fill that funding gap?
I had 2 specific meetings about that very issue today.
You're welcome.
Again, nothing's off the table. And when we've got a large funding gap like this, it's difficult to value engineer and scope things down to a point with what we've got right now. And so, yes, looking at private-public partnerships is really or public-private partnerships. The triple P is something that a lot of other communities engage in, and there's several different versions or forms or methodologies of how those would work. Naming rights is not off the table, but we do have a few things against us. The fact that it's not on a main thoroughfare, that it's not a large sports venue or something like that. Those are where a lot of the naming rights goes to. But philanthropic giving out of corporations is a mandate. So yes, a lot of companies are financially hurting, but there's also a lot of companies out there that have obligations that they have to spend philanthropic dollars. Oftentimes it's just, they're not asked. They're not going to come out and seek us out and offer us money. We need to identify who they are and ask. And so that's going to be another part and piece of this and all future, major capital projects. And that's kind of under that additional revenue sources, 4th bullet for our strategy.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you, Jason. Thanks you, Mike.
Thank you.
So Milwaukee Bay Park update.
The only update I've got right now is that the construction IGA between the district and the city of Milwaukee is still being worked through with the commissioner break that we just had. There were some slowdowns in getting information between I think it was the 2 legal counsels. As a result of that, we were supposed to this week have the 2 Inc. Contract amendment for Milwaukee Bay Park before the BCC and board. That's been put on hold until we can get more movement on the Milwaukee Bay Park project. As it is right now, though, there's nothing that's changed significantly of the project scope or anything. We just didn't feel it, and the board didn't feel that it was prudent to move forward with the 2 Inc. contract when there was still uncertainty on the overall agreement that would guide some of that work. So I don't really have any more information on that other than I just wanted to be able to give you an update. If there's any questions.
Nope, I don't see any hands. Okay, thank you.
I did have a question.
Oh, sorry.
The 2 Inc. contract, they're just the designers, right? They have nothing really to do with the IGA between Milwaukee and the district. Time is of essence. Why can't they just get going on the design and the IGA stuff get worked out? I feel like the city of Milwaukee and NCPRD have a great relationship, and the IGA is going to work out. There's only finite time, and there's lots of funding on the line between all the granting agencies, Metro's local share. I would like people to really think, well, Paul's here, obviously. I would like people, Paul, to really consider moving forward as quick as possible, knowing that the IGA is going to get worked out. Engineering isn't going to start until the green light is on, and that's going to create some real time sensitive issues in the long run that could turn around and bite us. So I just want to advocate that. I think that Milwaukee and the NCPRD have a great relationship, and the IGA is going to get worked out, and that engineering team needs to get going. That's all I got. Thanks for listening.
Thank you. All right, no more questions on that. Seeing the hands are so small, you see. So we're up to citizen participation. Do we have anyone who has communicated they wish?
Chair, you missed the parking lot discussion.
Oh, upcoming agenda. Yes, yes. Thank you so much. So who's going to speak to that? You or me?
I can, if you would indulge me.
Please do.
So as Chair had mentioned right at the very beginning of the meeting, there's been essentially almost 4 years of kind of backlog of things that the board needs to, or the committee needs to be considering. I don't even have a full appreciation of the chair's very long list. We've got an internal list that we're starting. And so we recognize that we need to try and come up with, I hope, a somewhat planning or strategic document that we can start putting all these items into a parking lot. So that way, when we have opportunities to add to cover things and bring them off that list, we can do so. But then we have a way to track all those things, both on their priority, both on whether they're operational or capital or administrative, and then be able to have a tracking document, not just for us being staff, but for you all and the public. I would plan on this list being something that we publish on our website as well, so that people can see what business we're doing and the long list of things that that this group has to catch up on. And so the talk at agenda setting was to create this parking lot list. I'm envisioning it, at least to start, as an Excel spreadsheet that would do that, have the title of what it is, whether it's a policy issue, whether it's a review issue, whether it's guidance, whatever these things are, have them in a list, have them be, and when I say prioritized, 1, 2, and 3. 1, it has to get done right away. 2, it's critical, but it can be put off a little bit. 3, we can put that on the back burner until we have the chance to talk about it or deal with it. Again, just basic categorization, and then really tracking. And that's something internally we do staff wise, is keeping up on that list, updating it every month if things are added on. Because at agenda setting, again, you're all encouraged to put suggestions forward to the chair and the vice chair for when agenda setting happens to place on the agenda. But if we've got a really full agenda, it might be something that has to get put into the parking lot. And so we can refer to this as kind of a living document that keeps all of us kind of on track, and then also provides that information to the citizens, that anybody that wants to be able to see what it is that we've got in the works. And hopefully have on that spreadsheet as well some estimated completion or movement date. So that again, we can be updating it weekly or monthly. So that's the general idea of the parking lot list. I think the intent was to bring that idea forward to the whole body and get some feedback. Or if you would prefer, I'm fully intending on trying to have at least the structure of the spreadsheet by next month's meeting, maybe with the chair's list and our list maybe starting to populate it. But again, it's meant to be a living document. We don't do it once and slap a coat of shellac on it. We are updating it as we go and as we move.
Great, thanks. And the other thing I don't want to add anything, I just want to underline that the reality is this is so that constituents, as well as DAC members, as well as NPRD, as well as they all can add things to that list so that we can be responsive, because I'm very clear, the more we include people, the more we will be able to have support going forward in broader things and different ideas. So I'm very clear about that. The other thing I want to speak to is, so I've been working on this project since 2014 about parks and how we're going to move things forward, et cetera. I've only been directly involved for a few years now, but so that's why I have a list, and I am a representative. So I have to juggle being the chair and just facilitating the movement of the meetings, as well as being a representative for sub-area 1 and the number of people who have comments, concerns, et cetera, about things that we want to work on. So I'm going to have to go back and forth on that. But for now, thanks for that great explanation. Any questions about our parking lot or running list? And so we should have that to show by before next meeting then, correct?
I think Ben's got his hand up again.
Oh,
Yeah, I want to make sure if it's not on the list is where the system plan update is going to occur, and where's the momentum and what's the plan for having that start off, because I feel like there's a lot of unanswered questions that we're always going to come up with, and until we have a system plan, we can't answer them. So I feel like that should be in there. Thank you.
Yeah, it's at the top of our list. I'm sure it's on the chair's list as well. It is really literally at one of the very, very top items on our list. Right now, we have a resource issue. We're just trying to figure out how we can do it with the staff that we've got. Inevitably, I think it's going to, just for pure unbiased reasons and removing ourselves from that, there's going to be, I'm guessing, some sort of a consultant that's brought in to help facilitate that. But that is something that's been talked about. I just don't have a firm answer of when we're going to actually try and get that process kicked off. As soon as possible, though, is our goal. That is going to drive a lot of our other decision making and how we conduct business, moving forward. So it's very critical to us.
great. Yeah, you certainly are taking on data fast, right, Mike?
Yeah.
Good. Thanks for keeping up, and I'm looking forward to when it's not all new. Okay, any other thing on the agenda setting? Okay, good. Now we're ready for citizen participation. Do we have people who've indicated they wish to speak? And if so, who's tracking that and how will we know?
Jan Calder's has her hand raised in the audience.
Okay. Oh,
Yeah,
video
thank
too.
you. Thank you. I appreciate it. I have about 3 small questions. One of them is because of the extensive funding gap, both for Milwaukee Bay and for Concord. I'm curious, is there a development director for the NCPRD, or are we depending upon development direction from the county? How does that happen? How does fundraising occur professionally? That's the first one.
Mike, you're muted.
Sorry about that. We do not currently have a development manager or director or anybody that is resourced specifically for fundraising. That is one of my areas that if I, had unlimited funds, we would be hiring that as one of our first additional staff. But as it is, our budget does not allow for that. Right now, I'm just in the initial development stages of a couple of initiatives. It's something that I'm probably going to be taking on as part of my responsibilities, at least to start with, to begin some of those conversations. I'm a graduate of the National Recreation and Park Association Revenue and Resource Development School, so I've got some very specific ideas that we can move forward with. Unfortunately, none of them are easy and none of them are quick. They take time and they take resources. So we are going to be working on that. But to cover our current funding gaps, we don't have anybody in place to help with the fundraising.
So we're doing a lot of work to plan things that we don't have the resources for. So I'm curious, is this a possibility of an area that you could begin to draw on professional level volunteer support in some kind of structure? And if there is, that'd be something I'd be interested in knowing about. The second question would be regarding the SDC subject early on. You kept mentioning, well, if we go to a flat or universal rate, universal system rather, methodology, the rates would be different. But I'm not understanding why they would be different. You're just going from 3 zones to 1 zone, and growth for a development would still be growth for a development. It would still have an impact, but it would just impact the entire district rather than an area. So I'm not clear about what an area is. And I'm just wondering if we have to really go through that whole consulting process, at least to make the decision that we're going to single zone, single district.
And again, thank you, Jan. My only answer is I can only go off of information that I've been provided at this point, which has been very extensive of the amount of lift that staff has been trying to give me. The way I understood it from the consultants, and this was the consultant that did the initial methodology work, is that there's not really a way to just pick it up and run with it as it was left in 2018. The details of that, I'm not sure. I have not had a chance to speak with the consultant yet. And my subject matter experts been out of town for the last several days. And so when that question came to me, I could only go off of what I had seen as far as their replies to that question before.
Right, and Mike, I'm not trying to pin you down particularly as much as I am just to pose the question. The assumption is that it may be a longer consulting process and there's more to be figured out. I'm just curious to ask the question, why would it be different? So that would be the other one. So thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's good work.
Are there any other public comments?
There's nobody that's got their hand up on the attendees side. Oh, Karen Bjorklund has raised her hand.
Okay.
Thank you. I believe I'm unmuted now. And thank you, Mike, for saying my last name correctly. It's always a thrill when someone gets that. As the District Advisory Committee may know, I sent you all a letter recently letting you know, this has to do with the naming of the Boardman Wetlands Park, that there was some information you didn't have. I could tell that from your last meeting. So I had sent some additional information, and you may be going to talk about this in your member reports later on. So the participation section might have been kind of out of order for this, but wanted to let you know that I was here, and if you, this is obviously not a time when you're going to discuss this issue, but if while I'm here this evening, if there's a question you want to ask or more information you want back, I will try to help you get that. There are additional community members who have said that to support the foundation of the advisory committee, which was built on community involvement, that they have said that the park naming in this case should also honor that principle of community involvement, especially because this particular park property was given from one rate or taxpayer-based entity, which is the Oak Lodge Water Services District, to another, which is Clackamas County. And as I said in my letter to you, the name matters to a lot of people in Jennings Lodge because, for one thing, community members proposed the word wetlands in the title to acknowledge both the specific location and the specific importance and nature of the park. But there's another thing that you may want to explore later with folks in Jennings Lodge, and that is that community members have said that the underserved Jennings Lodge area is still looking for the community park they were promised, and that that wetlands park isn't the promised park, so they didn't want a park name that would imply it is. So that also might be a subject you want to explore. What is it that Jennings Lodge is looking for in a community park that they think they're promised down the line? So thank you for your attention to this matter, and I hope we can work all these things out.
Okay. Thank you, Karen, and I'm glad you're still here. Are there other people? Because I actually do believe that we all received that communication. And in my reading of it, it speaks specifically back to that question I posed about when we speak, when we vote, when we express our opinion, are we speaking based on, well, I live in the area, so that's my opinion and that's how we're doing it, or are we in fact looking to the constituents we represent? And I think that's a critical issue, because to have people feel heard and listened to, if they're not being, and it creates a problem in that regard. So I don't know where or when that fits in. I do know that communication went out to everyone. And then there, in addition to that, it's things like the communication that I saw that came in from Thelma Hagemiller today. And when does that get fitted or delivered to the district advisory committee for hearing it? Because I know that we all heard the part about the path up at Altamont, and there was lots of discussion about that because we all met like the day after. But the concerns about zoning, which is what Thelma's was about, or Karen Bjorklund, or the information that was sent in by some DAC members, et cetera, about this issue about listening to the community. When do we get to include that in the conversation? So I'm asking all of us, do we need to put that on the agenda? Because we are going to have it be on the agenda next time about who do we represent and who do we speak for and how do we fulfill what our representative responsibilities are. But here's one that sits right now. Yes, Ben.
I have a question. Did any of the Native American tribes get reached out to in this naming process? Were they part of the community? Because I know a lot of jurisdictions that I've worked with in park districts have a pretty regimented naming policy. And a lot of times it involves, you know, the Native Americans that, you know, their forefathers lived there long before we did. And I just hope that maybe that's part of the conversation as well. So I appreciate this being brought up because naming is a very sensitive issue.
I agree with you.
Sometimes I find it hard that I don't feel like I'm the right person, or maybe we're not the right body to take that on. I think there should be maybe a naming committee that is involved, because even sometimes these groups like these CPOs or neighborhood communities, they're a very small fraction of people that show up, and you know, maybe there's 3 voices that get heard, and is that really representative of the community? I don't think so. I think it's a really good conversation, Grover, and I forget the person's name, that Karen Yorkman. I appreciate that, and I think it definitely reckons broader conversation about what is the right thing to do.
I agree with you completely about, so that's one of the things that our naming policy that we were all distributed a couple times since I've been part of this group, that actually spell out what we do. It doesn't even bring up the part about checking with minority populations, native populations, et cetera. But it also doesn't have any specific outreach that we follow. And so we just, well, nobody's here to talk about it, but case in point, the communication that came from Karen Bjorklund specifically does give, you're right, some CPOs are minuscule and some are bigger and some are more active. But the Jennings Lodge CPO did address that issue, did send in, did talk about the number of votes that were present, people who voted, kind of conversation. And has that been distributed? Well, you all got it. So do things come in and if nobody raises a question, then it just floats on by, as opposed to how do we respond to the very thought-provoking work that Karen Bjorklund put in, that Anita put in, that I'm trying to remember who else put things in, but there have been several people. Oh, I know, Steve Berliner. So they all have submitted well thought out, and then for that matter, the letter from the contributing body, the Oak Lodge Water Services people, and their letter. Has that been distributed? How many of you have seen it? So I don't know where to go with this now, but I want to keep bringing it up until we figure out some way that we can address what comes down the pike. And part of this will be the parking lot, but we don't have any process to address these things. And that's a concern I have. So I don't think we're going to solve it now. Any more citizen participation? Yes, Luca.
I think that this is I actually highlighted this in the very beginning about the communication part. I think this is actually part of our steep learning curve as a new committee as well. I think this is something that maybe there's something that we take in a different conversation where it's just the committee sitting around going, okay, how do we want to approach these things? Because we're all learning. And I think this is one of the things that as a committee, now that it's up and running, that we're like, oh yeah, we didn't actually think about that. And there's nothing wrong with that. I think it's us, falling forward in many ways, just to make sure that we are representing our community the way that we're meant to be doing it. So I totally think this is up for more discussion. I personally think maybe it's something that we can do as a committee. Maybe it's a separate meeting where we're just sitting there and sort of trying to hash our way through this and go, how do we want to do this as a group?
That's excellent. Thank you for that, Luca. I do have a clarification. So I'd like to appeal to somebody else to let me know, but if we have any meeting, it's a public meeting. So whether it's part of our standard monthly meeting, that's which raises an important issue because of the backlog. I look back over and I'm familiar with for many years, including the district advisory board that helped rewrite the bylaws. We had we'd have a meeting and then we'd break and then we'd have another meeting in the same evening. And so we need to start looking at what's going to get on our plate and what other options we have for being able to address all that. So thank you for that, Luca. Somebody said Anita had her hand up. Did I hear that? You're muted.
I was going to bring up the Steve Berliner letter that he sent to all the DAC, but then he mentioned there was going to be some written testimony, and I don't know where that went and how we get that part from him. Okay. And then you just mentioned something like a work session or something that would happen after the regular meeting. Is that a work session also a public meeting, or is it a different animal?
My thinking is that it's a public meeting as well. Anytime we convene, we're a public meeting. Even if we're a subcommittee, it's still a public meeting. We may not get as big an audience if we're a subcommittee or something to that, but but no, all of our meetings whenever we have a quorum, we're a public meeting.
So what's a work session look like? How does it differ from the regular DAC meeting?
It's longer than 2 hours in one day.
Is it just like having a longer meeting, basically?
That's exactly, we had 4-hour meetings,
Oh, okay.
one after another to write change the bylaws. But even in the distant past, they used to have a meeting, take a break, and then have another meeting for another couple, 3 hours. So at least anyway. So that's, it's all stuff for us to ponder. And I don't think we're going to change any of that now. And my only hope was to raise the questions so we can figure out how we're going to get this done. And I appreciate what Lucas said. Clearly, we're on our falling forward learning curve.
Exactly. Yeah, I like that too.
Okay, Mr. Savas.
Yeah, hello, everyone. Just an observation. I can tell from every meeting we've had thus far with the new DAC that there's a lot of things you all want to talk about and work on and work you want to get finished. And I'm just kind of wondering whether it's a longer meeting or more frequent meetings to get caught up. And I think that the idea of the spreadsheet, of the parking lot spreadsheet, would be a great tool for you all to, to look over every month or meeting to some degree and prioritize what you want to work on and actually be able to see how much work you have in front of you to get caught up. And granted, once you're caught up, you'll be in better shape. But after being on hiatus for a couple, 3 years, there's a big backlog. So just a suggestion. Thank you.
Excellent. Anita, your hand's still up. Now it's down. Anyone else on this? Are we still in public comment? Or are we sort of wandering? Okay, no more public comment, correct? Public comment is now closed. And by the way, can we change it in the future, not call it citizen participation, either public comment or community input or something? That was the advice of the CCI. DAC member reports. Who's first? Anita.
Well, it's in some way, it's more public comment. Just because I keep a little list of input I've gotten from constituents. And then I just feel as though I want to run it by everybody. Maybe it'll end up in some kind of a parking lot or other. Of course, everybody got the input from Thelma, I guess, about she supports the idea of no zones. And another person who created and runs the seed library at the Oak Lodge Library has a wish for a seed growing area on the Concord property. And another person spoke to me about just some changes maybe to NCPRD's website to make it easier to find things, especially how to get to this meeting. And then something that's been building in my mind is this idea of how the public, how the communities can sort of kickstart and advance parks in their neighborhoods. And of course, the prime example that we had on our tour was Wichita Park, which I think one of the neighborhood associations had a great deal to do with. And Balfour Park also is coming on now, that also had that kind of support. And so I'm aware of a group of people in sub-area 3 who are very eager to advance the Justice property and have it be developed into a park. And it's already owned by NCPRD, but it's in limbo and has been in limbo for, I've forgotten how many years, many, many years. And then there's a group of people in historic downtown Oak Grove in that organization that are really looking forward to a park at New Urban High School, which was moving forward at one time, and then various people like Scott Archer left and the principal left of the high school. So it's also in limbo, but people don't want it to be forgotten. And then the community park that Karen Bjorklund mentioned also for sub-area 1. So I just want to put those on the list so they don't get forgotten.
So might want to look at what, Mike, the method for having things put on lists, have them be spoken here, it puts it on a list, or do they need to be sent as an email or some other format? That's the thing that we can talk about on Monday, and we'll collect what was said here. Is that, we have a secretary to take care of that? It'll be in the minutes or the summary. Okay, good. Yes, Joel.
Hey, I guess I bring this up only because it was kind of alluded to a little earlier, I guess technically during the public participation. And Michael, I'm not trying to put you on the spot. I know you responded to this. I brought up the issue of not knowing everyone's background here, but I know public meeting law and public records law is something, I mean, just as conduct for all of us being DAC members should be familiar with really from the beginning. And I don't know, hopefully I'm going to push for this to be on our October agenda. You had mentioned that maybe this would be something you could help spearhead for our October meeting, but that is still some time off. I know that this was addressed back in November 2019. There's audio recording that I know all of us have access to, as including the public, that they may want to review when Stephen Madcourt presented to the then DAB. If there's any other additional resources or kind of a pamphlet kind of a thing that you could provide to DAC members now, I think it's advisable, because there's a lot of things we're kind of throwing around here. And I think we should all kind of be on the same page as to what public meeting laws and public record laws are kind of requiring us to do.
Okay, Mike, your hands up.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, to speak to that, thank you, Joel. I've been in conversations this week with our legal counsel, finding out what was provided at last year's training. And I plan on bringing something right now. I think it's probably going to be realistically the November meeting, because what I'm hoping to do is provide a more strategic, not just open meetings, but parliamentary how to, help guide, a cheat sheet for people to help make motions and do that kind of stuff, in addition to some of the open meeting law guidelines. I was gonna, in my director's comments, I was gonna speak about general board communications today. So thank you.
Okay. Monitor, your hand still up or not gone down? You're muted, Anita.
I didn't mean to leave it up, but I was sitting here thinking also about how I really appreciated what Ben said about not dumbing down the park at the Concord property. So I just wanted to mention that. I think that's a really important input.
Okay. Any more DAC member reports? Hearing none, seeing no hands, we can go to the director's report.
Thank you, Chair. I just have a couple of comments, and my overall one is I've now been here just about 6 weeks. And I would say the biggest thing that I've learned is that I still have a whole lot left to learn. And it's been a bit, no, I don't want to say overwhelming, but there's a lot to try and absorb. And so if I've misspoken or miscommunicated in any way, I apologize for any past, and because I'm sure it's going to potentially happen again in the future. So apologies right now for that as well. But I am trying to get my feet up under me with a lot of these issues as quickly as possible. And I appreciate all the support that I've gotten so far for that. So that was my just general statement. The board communication, as I had mentioned, I was planning on holding a kind of open meetings, parliamentary, very short, similar to the slides like you're seeing here, not very many of them, but kind of to the point of not overall case law of open meetings and all of that, but how it affects this body and how properly to communicate. So my overall guidance is, until we can have that training, and I know this was something that Stephen had covered last year, but my general guidance or best suggestion for right now is just remembering that to carefully consider what you're saying as a DAC member because you don't really have the ability to just take your hat off and speak as a private citizen. And so communication amongst the board, it doesn't have to just be 3 people in a room together that triggers open meetings law. That's the most obvious example of if, 3 or more gather, it's got to be noticed. But even communication in the body while in between meetings, if it's related to possible past, current, or future board action, just carefully consider whether or not you're upholding the spirit of the law of open meetings, which is really any discussion that you have about board items, things like that, should be brought to the public forum and discussed either here or at work sessions or through email communication. And so until I can really develop and make sure that there's not any Oregon specific things that I'm not aware of as far as open meetings, just carefully consider when you're sending out communications to friends, listservs, individuals. Should it be something that is brought before the whole group versus not? With that said, our goal and my job is not to stifle your voices. It's just to facilitate it for the best transparent public use. So my ask would be, if you have something that you want to bring up as a discussion point to the board, or if you've got a message that you want to send out to others in the community, please send it to Jessica. She is our liaison. And the best way for us to preserve public records and the public trust is to have communications from the body coming through the department and then being sent out. And we're still figuring out how best to do that. It's very difficult sometimes when we get some of these emails that come in. We're not always sure exactly who else it's been sent to or who it's not been sent to. So you've seen, we've sent out a few or passed on a few messages in the last couple of days. We will plan on continuing to do that. So that way, if something comes into us, we're sending it out to you. But be careful when you are communicating and just sending out messages to others. I'm not saying there's violations, just be careful at this point until we can get some better clarification and go through some more guidelines. We don't want anybody to not have the trust that the body is acting as one, because that's ultimately the actions of the individuals in the body are the actions really of the body. So we need to just be careful on that. I can't tell you not to communicate in the ways that you have, but just be careful and consider, is this something that should be sent out by me as an individual or on behalf of the board? So for instance, if let's just say if a committee member Nicodemus wants to send out a message to everybody that he wants and he's got a listserv, we'll still send the message out with his name. It's not that it's coming from us. It's on behalf of committee member Nicodemus that then is sent out to everybody. So there will hopefully be more clarification because it's not super clear in my mind right now. But there are a few things that I've seen that are concerning that I even checked with legal to see, is this okay? And the answer is kinda. So we need to just be careful of it. And once I've got some better, stronger recommendations, I'll be bringing that forward. Again, I hope November for the meeting. And those, other than that, my other comments are the department's running. We've got lots and lots of things going. Sports are, different sports are getting ready to kick off. Lots of marketing and communications stuff, a lot of asset development, and then just general overall strategic planning. We've got about 25 things that all need to be done at once, and we can't do that. So we're trying to strategize on how best to affect all of these things in the most strategic manner so that we're not wasting a lot of time and duplicating things. For instance, a lot of the data that we would get from a master plan can also be used for capital projects planning, can also be used. So when we're laying out how we're trying to move forward and have momentum. There's just a lot of juggling right now. And I anticipate that that's probably going to continue at least for a little longer, but I hope that we're going to start seeing some positive motion on some of these things. For instance, like bringing, a contract forward for engaging a master plan. But there's literally a huge list just internal to us that we've already got, let alone the backlog that Chair Bornefeld's got, as well as all the other members to include on that. So it's been a great first 6 weeks. I've still got a smile on my face. I'm still happy to come to work every day. I've got an awesome group of people to work with. It's just going to take us a little while to get to where I can see everybody wants us to be, me included. It's that lift or falling forward, I think somebody said. That's a great way to think of it. I was saying drinking from the fire hose last week, but I think falling forward's a little more of a accurate statement. So with that, thank you, Chair. That's all my comments.
Thank you. Okay. With Zoom, I can't tell if you stopped or not. So I assume you did. So now just we're going to clarify our future dates. Our next meeting will be Wednesday, October 13th. And our to stay ahead of the game, our agenda setting for that meeting will be this coming Monday on September 13th. And our intent is to have a distribution of the materials in advance so people can read them in advance. And so the deadline to have things be considered for the agenda is at 7 a.m. on Monday morning. Any questions? All right. Thanks, everybody. We are adjourned.